go through that, we kind of go do a little bit of review of the material as well. Tentatively, let's say that I might be doing a Zoom next Wednesday, the 21st at 8 p.m. And I will adjust or do a new Zoom link. And then also one on Monday, June 2nd. Okay. So, and I will, once I confirm that, I will put an announcement out for you all so that everyone's on board and tracking with that. Okay. So next thing I'd like to mention here is I like to start on time or I give a minute or two, but my goal is to try and keep these to about 1 hour because I know your time is precious and mine is as well, especially since I'm not teaching other than this course right now. The semester actually ended at OU, so you guys are holding up my summer already. No, but it's okay. It's an online course. I can teach this while I'm on vacation. But I do like to keep it to about an hour. If we go over an hour, that's okay. But that's just a goal of mine. I know those of you who are listening to the recorded version of this, this isn't a very convenient time for those of you who might be in Europe. And I apologize. It's just, I've never found a great time to satisfy everybody around the world. But this works for North America and actually East Asia because it's in the morning there. And so that works for people who are in Korea or Japan or somewhere like that, in China even. So, okay, so let me get started. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to do an introduction. I'm going to have you all briefly introduce yourselves. And then I'm going to talk about the course written assignment, as well as the first quiz. I'm going to talk about the intensity of the course as well, the reading, and how much time you should spend on this course per day and on the weekends. It is a 4-week course that is, it's a version of a 16-week course, which has been crushed into 4 weeks. I wish I could make it easier than a 8-week or a 16-week course. And there are some things that do clearly drop out. I don't do as many weekly discussion questions, for sure, but the standards are the same. And as I probably put in the announcement or the syllabus, this isn't a great time to go on vacation. If you're working, I think it's very doable. If you're on deployment, I know some of you are in the military, you might be on deployment. I'm not going to lie, it's going to be tough. This has been tough for those who've been deployed in the past. So just take that into consideration and carve out the time as you can. So a little bit about me. My name is Rob Andrew. I'm an instructor here at the College of International Studies at OU. And I also teach on campus undergrad courses, and I teach for the Gamma program at the graduate level. Mostly the same courses, by the way. So this is U.S.-Russia relations. And I might have had some of you, I don't think, has anyone here that's live had taken one of my courses before? I don't think so, right? So there may be some out there that have, but I also teach courses on Arctic security, which is a relatively new course on diplomacy, the practice of diplomacy. I'm a retired diplomat. I'll talk about that here in a second. I'm putting together a brand new course, which I will teach the second half of the fall semester, the second 8 weeks of the fall, on the 1991 Gulf War, what we call the first Gulf War. I also teach the practicum. I'm one of the instructors that teaches that. So that is the only course which is a core requirement, or one of the core requirements for your Gamma degree. The other courses I just mentioned, including this one, are electives, essentially, for you. So a little bit about me. I am a retired Foreign Service officer. I served in several overseas locations, including Mexico City, Mexico, Moscow, Russia, San Jose, Costa Rica, and Stockholm, Sweden, as well as a few assignments stateside at Mothership and at Maine State Department in Washington, D.C., as well as down in Miami, Florida, actually with Southern Command as a civilian advisor to the Marine Corps component of Southern Command, as what they call a foreign policy advisor, or a POLAD. And actually did an assignment right here at OU as the diplomat in residence about 10 years ago. And that's a fancy name for essentially a recruiter for the State Department. So that's my little bit about my foreign service career. And I'm always happy to answer questions. By the way, I'm also a career mentor for students on campus who are interested in foreign service careers and government careers. I know that things are up in the air, but you should also consider me a potential mentor as well if you are interested in the foreign service in particular. So before my teaching time, before the Foreign Service, I was an Army officer. I was a field artillery officer, and I'm not located too far away from where the home of field artillery is, which is of course Fort Sill, Oklahoma, just down the road about an hour and a half from here. Various assignments. As I like to say, you're looking at one of the last U.S. military officers to patrol the old East-West German border back in the bad old days of the let's call it the First Cold War now, and with between East-West Germany and Czechoslovakia. Before, and that's where I'm getting a lot of my material for my course. But it's not just going to be about me in there, but it is going to take a more of a foot soldier's approach to the course, actually. So it'll be probably unique compared to most courses that you might potentially take. And let's see where else. Various assignments: Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and a couple other places. Oh, Presidio in Monterey, which is where I was training to be a FAO, a foreign area officer for the Army, when I decided to jump ship and become a civilian and join the Foreign Service after I went through that testing process. So that's just a little bit about me. So what I'd like to do here, and we'll start with you, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but top left of my screen is Duong. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Good evening, Professor. My name is. Yep.
How long? Is this your first class? How far along you are in the program, and when you expect to graduate? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for coming to the meeting today. My name is Chinese Duong. You can call me Chinese, my first name. And I'm from Cambodia. But currently, I work at the Permanent Mission of Cambodia to United Nations in New York. And before came here, I served at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Cambodia in the General Department of Legal Affairs. And this is my second semester for me before I took international law courses and the U.S. foreign policy, the U.S. Foreign relation. And the expectation for my graduation, it should be in 2026 because this is a second semester for me. That's all for me, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chinese, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you for that. And so interesting to have international students, and good place to be stationed at in New York. I hope you're enjoying all of the amenities that the city has to offer there. Good. Danny, you're next on my screen here. So make sure I'm pronouncing your name right, and the same for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Hurley. I'm actually located here in Norman. I'm an academic advisor on the campus for undergraduates, actually in biology, so completely unrelated to the subject field. This is my third semester, I believe. I started in the fall, so this is my third semester in the program, and I expect to graduate in fall 2026.
Very good. Now, you're not related to Kyle Hurley, are you?
I do not believe so. That is at least not somebody who's in my immediate family.
Yeah, the reason I mention that is I'm a Rotarian here in Norman, and I was president of the Norman Rotary Club. But one of our members is also the past president. His name is Kyle Hurley. He's actually one of the administrators at Norman Regional Hospital. He's in the medical field. So, anyways, nice to meet you, and thank you for that. And by the way, I do offer, particularly for those students who are local, whether they're in Norman or Oklahoma City, and they find themselves in Norman. If you ever want to get an office call with me in my office, I'm happy to do that. I'm obviously clearly happy to do a Zoom call as well for those of you who are not in the local area. If you would like, you have a question, but if you're local, I would much rather meet in person, and happy to do that to schedule that. So, welcome aboard, Danny, and Boomer Sooner. There you go. So, you're all Boomer Sooners if you're taking this program. So, we'll go to Chris next.
Hello, my name is Christian Gonzalez, and I serve as a senior intelligence analyst for the Oklahoma National Guard Joint Intelligence Directorate. I get to advise for strategic planning and policy for General Mancino, who's our two-star. I began this program in January of this year, and I'm expected to graduate in May of 2026. I'm located here in Edmond, Oklahoma.
So you are local as well. Very good.
Yes, sir.
So I have a quick question for you, Chris, and welcome aboard. I wasn't a Navy guy, but I like saying that. Have you had a course or plan to take one with Dr. Sartorius?
Have not. I don't know who that is.
So I'll tell you who he is. He's a retired U.S. Air Force intelligence officer, and he teaches an intel course for the Gamma program.
I think I should. Okay, I think I'm enrolled in his class in the fall.
Yeah, it'll be one of the best classes you've taken. So
awesome.
After mine, of course, but
right. So. Well, I'm learning about you. I actually want to follow your footsteps and get into the Foreign Service career. So that's my plan after the military. So I definitely have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, so since you're local, what I'm over at the moment, and we can do it sooner or later, or we can wait till the fall, whenever you want. I am mostly around this summer. I am taking vacation in June for a week and July for about 2 weeks. But otherwise, I'm here doing research and putting together my new course. To do that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris. And Alfonso, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, hello. My name is Alfonso Ortega. So I'm currently in Montana. I'm a security forces officer for the United States Air Force, actually commissioned out of OU. Currently
What
right
year?
now, this last year, May of 24. So just commissioned brand new lieutenant right now.
What was your major? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it was a criminal justice major.
So I didn't run into you, but in your Air Force, you said, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just went to the U.S. Air Force commissioning 2 days ago here for OU, and fantastic class. I'm sorry, I was probably at your commissioning last year, and I just didn't know who you were. Yeah, because I've had a lot of Air Force cadets in my classes on campus.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I was a criminal justice major. I know a lot of people had Dr. Sartorius, like you said. I met him before. Great guy. He gave us a really good intel kind of brief on the Air Force intel background. It was a very interesting conversation we had with him. No, but this is my first graduate class. Kind of thrown into the fire, to be honest.
Yeah. I don't want to lie. I don't want to tell you guys a lie. This is an intense course. You can do it. It's doable. You just have to put the time into it. And I'll lecture you all on that more in a little bit. But go ahead.
No, but I'm excited for this course. I'm excited for this degree. I'm interested in being a FAIL, like you explained. Currently doing part of the language-enabled airman program. I speak Spanish on the side, so basically that's kind of the track. You become a FAIL, you speak the language, and then you do all these programs. So I mean, that's the plan in the future. Foreign service officer, I don't know. I mean, I plan to do a 20-year career with the Air Force, but afterwards, I really don't know. I'm looking in the air for anything. But I'm excited. I'm excited to start this course.
Very good. Well, thanks, Alfonso. Just before I leave you, what's your job in the Air Force? Did you say?
I'm a security forces officer. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a few, at least 2, maybe 3 from this year's crowd, because we had 21 Air Force cadets get commissioned, and I want to say at least 2 of them were going in your track. So
I know. I met. So most of them are friends. I mean, they were juniors when I was a senior. So
right.
I know at least of one. Maybe there's 2. The security force curriculum is pretty small in the Air Force, at least for officers. Unless it's huge, but as an officer goes by, it's pretty small. It's interesting.
Yeah, it may have only been 1. I remember hearing it. I was there primarily for Joshua Socius. Did you know him?
Yeah, Socius. Yeah, he's a great cadet. Well, now lieutenant. He's an awesome.
Now lieutenant. Yeah, he took 1 or 2 of my courses, and he was one of my best students, and that's why I went. I went to support him, and then another cadet that was there was named Rebecca Morin. I don't know if you know her or not.
Yeah, Morin. Yeah, she was I trained her when she first got as a cadet. Yeah.
So I actually advised her 5 years ago for a military career. And then her dad is also in my Rotary Club here in Norman and was the president just before I was. So small world type of thing.
A very small world, yes.
All right. So, well, thank you, Alfonso. Welcome aboard. And Rachel, last but not least, and if you could also share a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Lockett, and I am located in Texas. I started the program, like Danny, in the fall of 2024. And so I should complete the program also in the fall of 2026. And I am hoping to work in the international development sector. I currently am working at a nonprofit organization where we teach digital literacy and mental health trainings and health education courses. So, yeah.
Great. Well, hopefully one day USAID will be back. That would be good. And then, whereabouts in Texas are you?
I'm Houston, Texas.
Houston. Okay, very good.
Yes.
As long as you're not showing us, your horns up there, it's all okay, right? So.
Not a Longhorn.
It's all good. We're all good here. So, okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you for that. I like taking a little bit of time to know who my audience is, and I adjust my remarks a little bit. So what we'll do right now is I'm going to share my screen. You may have had a chance to look at the course written assignment. You only have 4 weeks to do this. I don't make it due till the last day of the course, but I must insist that it's due then because of when I have to get grades in. I wish I could give you a little bit of a breather after that, but so it'll be due on Friday, June 6th, right? That's the end of the course. And I have to have grades in on the 10th just a couple days later. So I do have a policy where you can turn it in late, but it's a very steep deduction. And if you turn it in on Monday, the 9th, there's no guarantee I'll get to it, and it'll be a big fat zero just because I may not have time to get to it before grades are due. So that's why I must insist on Friday, June 6th. And I don't mean that. I don't say that to be mean to you, but it's a timing issue. And what I would probably do if I were you is this week, probably don't worry about it too much, but start getting the idea going about which topic. And we're going to go over the topics here in a second. And then by the second week, you should have a draft or an outline. The third week, you should have drafted as much of it as you could. And then the fourth week, which I don't bother you with a weekly discussion question, I do in the first 3 weeks, you have essentially from, Monday, 2nd, the June 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then all day on the 6th to be able to turn it in and work on it. And that's when you can finish the draft, refine it, edit it, things like this. And I have some exacting standards and exactly what I want on it. And I'm going to talk about that here. So let me just bring up the actual assignments on the topics. This is the substance of the assignment. And then I'm going to talk about that, what you could write on. And then I'm going to talk about the template, basically the format on how I want it. And then I'm going to talk about the checklist briefly. There's a checklist which is mandatory to do when you turn in your paper, and then you attach it as an attachment to the comments section in Canvas there. And that is so you can show me that you've done proper editing and proofreading before you turned it in. And that will help you because you're not really going to get a chance for me to look at a paper beforehand. This is so short of a course, I don't have time to do that. If you ever take me for the practicum course, we do a first draft and second draft. We just don't have time for that here. So let me share my screen. And if someone could just kind of give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen. Very good. And what I am going to do here is I'm going to put this over here. And you all, is that legible more or less for you all? Can you read it? And by the way, this is on my own drive here. You can find this. I'll briefly go here. You can go to modules, and it's right here, not in the pre-course assignments, the so-called pre-course ones, which is what your first quiz is going to be about. But in the week 1, you can see down here at the bottom of the module the instructions, the template, the checklist, the outline here. I'll just show it to you briefly. This is a tool for you to use. I don't care if you use it or not, but it might assist you in organizing your thoughts, your paper. It's an idea on how to do an outline, but that's up to you for that. But I'm just going to open up these documents right here. Sorry. All right, so here's the instructions. And I'm going to try not to read word for word here, but try to emphasize the most important points. So you're going to use this in conjunction with the template, which we're going to go over after this, as well as the checklist. And so we're looking at an analytical essay of approximately 2,500 words, no less than 8 pages and around 10. You could go over 10, but if you really go to 13, 14, 15 pages, you're doing too much work. So we're looking at an 8 to 10 space page. That does not include the cover page and citations. Cover page is mandatory, as well as the citations. And I'm going to go over the citations in a little bit. And you're going to answer one of the following 5 questions. You choose one, and that's your prompt for your essay, for your paper for this course. Okay. The first one is, this is about, the question, if the United States and the Soviet Union were good allies, and they were, at least transactional allies during World War II, why did they become adversaries or enemies so quickly after the war concluded? What were the proximate causes of the deterioration of that relationship that led to the Cold War? What actions did the U.S. take to counter Soviet policy? And why were they important, and what, if any, effect did it have on the end of the Cold War? So you could call this a Cold War question, as well as, what happened in the immediate aftermath. Students have gone a few different routes. They've kind of treated this as the entire Cold War and did a little bit of an essay on that, which is fine. Some really concentrated on the immediate aftermath of World War II and kind of where things went wrong, and that's okay too. And as I write here in the italics in the parentheses, you can, if you also like, discuss the state of the relationship prior to the Bolshevik Revolution. This is actually, the Bolshevik Revolution, if you're not familiar with your Russian history, and if you haven't gone through my pre-course slides yet, or you're going through them now, It was really the Bolshevik Revolution which set the relationship between the U.S. and Russia in a tailspin that has really never fully recovered, to be honest. It's had superficial treatments since then that have made things somewhat better. During World War II, for instance, and in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War, but we seem to be back to our pattern that we've had since 1917. So that's the first question. You could answer this one if you want. Or, second choice is, and this is based on one of the books for the class, the Limits of Partnership book. Let me see if I have it ready right here. I do. It's this one. It's the one with President Obama and Putin reluctantly about to shake hands on the cover. It's written by Angela Stent, who's one of the great intellectuals on the U.S.-Russia relationship. And in that book, the book is based around what the author calls 4 resets in the relationship in the post-Cold War world. Starting in roughly 1990, 91, and up to about 2014. And so you could choose and describe one of those 4 resets in this paper. You can choose to write on 2 of them if you want, if it makes sense. You link them together. I'll leave that up to you. Some students have done that, but it might get a bit long. But where I've seen it work well is if you write on the first reset, which is, there's not a lot of grist on it, and sometimes they'll do a mixture of the first and the second one. But at any rate, if this all sounds Greek to you, you don't know what I'm talking about, you will, as you read this book, or hopefully you have it and you're starting to read it and what the resets are in the relationship. So this is choice number 2. Choice number 3 is a broader question in the post-Cold War period. And the basic question is, why has it been so difficult to have a better relationship? And I put it here. Let me see if I missed anything in the hint. Yeah, no. And the hint here, you should consider following questions. What areas of the relationship have worked best in the post-Cold War world? And in the post-Cold War world, time frame again is going to be kind of the same time frame as the era of the resets, roughly 1990 to 2014. What have been the most problematic and why? Why are our priorities so often misaligned? And what actions have strained the relationship by the Americans, by the Russians? Again, this is a great question, and is kind of based on the Stent book. Now we get to a little bit more difficult question. Some students choose to do this one. And this is about arms control. If you want to do this one, I would immediately skip ahead to, I believe it's in week 4, where I have a lecture on nuclear arms control and diplomacy. All of the modules are open, and go through that before you start reading, before you start writing on this one. But this is about basically what happens after New START. New START expires next February. And one of the things that I certainly haven't heard a lot of information yet from the Trump administration, Trump 2.0, is what to do next. They've talked a little about it, but there's so much focus has been elsewhere, particularly on Ukraine, which is the next question that you can answer if you want. What comes next? And so I give you a few hints here. Consider my nuclear diplomacy lecture as a starting point if you want to write on this. I might recommend learning more about one of our top negotiators, Rose Gottemuller. As you do your research, she was one of the authors of New START, negotiators for it as well. A great source is Arms Control Association. It's an online source. And then you should consider factors like modernization of current arsenals, new weapon systems like low-yield tactical nukes, particularly from the Russians, hypersonic weapons, maybe cyber-related or AI-related issues as well. I ask a question here, should we extend New START again in 2026? Well, there's actually no provision to do it, but given the Trump administration's approach, maybe they can. I don't know. But the way the treaty was written is they could only extend it once. So we'll see what's going to happen with that. And then there may be some new negotiations coming up, depending on what happens with the war in Ukraine and what's going on with that. Okay, so that's question number 4 you could consider, or question number 5, and this is your Ukraine question, right? So we have to address that. This should actually say summer of 2025, but I guess technically we're still kind of in spring. So given the current state of the relationship, and when I wrote this, I hadn't really considered any of the potential policy changes by the new administration. So you could factor that into this question as well. But your essay could be about the current state of the relationship as a result of the war in Ukraine. The sanctions, and I would want you to answer the following questions. I'm specifically listing that not as parentheses and hints. You would need to address these questions. Why does the invasion affect nearly all aspects of our relations? What's the immediate root cause of the tension over Ukraine? What are at least 3 examples of the relationship that have suffered as a result? Certainly arms control, one of them. What's the current status of the war? Which side seems to be winning and why? Well, if we can define it as winning or not. What steps have been taken to de-escalate tensions? Well, we know that supposedly tomorrow, there was this offer to meet in Istanbul. I don't know. I've been out all day today. I don't know if any of you have seen any news on that, whether that's going to happen. I don't know. I haven't seen anything. But what steps have been taken to de-escalate? And then finally, you're going to have to answer, compare and contrast current relations between our 2 countries as a result of Ukraine, and compare and contrast it with the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Okay. And I write here, of course, if you choose E, you may consider any policy changes by the new second administration of President Trump. Certainly, a lot of the course readings steer you towards one of these questions, or all of them, and as well as any additional sources that you might choose. You need to have at least 5 to 10 credible sources for this paper. You're going to please use Microsoft Word Times New Roman 12 with 1-inch margins, double spaced. Due last day of the course before midnight Central Time, and it's worth 25% of your grade. I'm going to go over the format here. You're going to need to cite all your sources fully using endnotes, not footnotes. If you don't know what those are, we're going to talk about that. That's the same as a footnote. It's just they're all pushed to the end of the paper, essentially. And a bibliography. As I told you earlier, you're also going to have to turn in the checklist that I provided. We're going to show that. I'll show that to you briefly. That you've thoroughly proofread your paper and followed instructions. That is one of the grading criteria, is going to be following instructions. Right. So before I go to the template, and I won't go quite word for the template, it's a little bit longer, but I want to expose it to you so you can use it. Are there any questions on the actual assignment, the substance? And I'm just going to stop sharing here for a moment so I can see you a little bit better. Any questions on that? Okay, seeing none, we will drive on. And if you have a question in a minute or two, I'll be sure to address it. Don't worry. Let me go over the checklist last. Let me go over the template first. So what I would do if I were you is I would save as this template and start writing your paper. I've already essentially formatted your cover page for you. The one thing that you do need to do here is you need to insert the question you're answering or the title of your paper, but make sure your title makes it clear which question you're answering. You could say answering question 1 and here's my title, something like that. Or you could literally copy and paste the question in here. That works too. Okay. Your name and then the course, my name, date. And please don't do what my undergrad students do, and they put an S on the end of my name. It drives me nuts. That's not my name. Or they'll misspell my name. And guess what happens? Their grading suffers a little bit as a result. Don't misspell the professor's name, please. If it were a really hard name, I would forgive you. Andrew's pretty easy. All right, so I am going to require headers. So this is a header, and you have to have an introduction, and you have to have a header that says introduction. I like this to organize the paper. And you're going to, and then here's another header. You shouldn't be called main body, but it could be, think of it like a chapter heading or, transitioning to a new topic. And I'll go over that here in a minute. And then you are going to have a analysis header and then a conclusion header as well. Now, you can Do your own headers in between, this for the main body, your own names. But those are ones that I'm absolutely going to require as part of the format, following instructions. If you don't do it, I will deduct points. We're not following directions in the format. Okay, so again, I won't read word for word here, but I am going to mention that the important things in the introduction here. This is, again, kind of giving you instructions. This is designed to help you format and write your assignment. You need a cover page. You see where the page numbers are, upper right. This template is your go-to source for questions on formatting. So this, for lack of a better word, call this Rob Andrews style. Okay, Rob Andrews manual style, this document. However, if in doubt and this template does not cover something that you have a question on, you can use the Chicago manual style as your stylistic guide. But you shouldn't choose that over mine. You try to do my format, and if I can't answer your question properly, then you go to that. And I give you a link here to where it is for the OU site. By the way, in your tuition, you all pay for the Writing Center. There is this thing called the OU Writing Center, and if you need help writing, go to them, and they will work with you online as well. Probably, if you only give them a couple days, they may not be able to help you, but maybe like the second to last week, they might be able to help you. As I said, you have to write an introduction, set the tone. The introduction should be totally in your own words. You don't need to be sourcing stuff yet. It's how you're going to write this paper, how are you going to approach it, right? Double spaced, think of your headings. Again, your heading shouldn't, after the introduction, when you go into the main body, shouldn't say main body, but it could be like, how Russia fooled the U.S. or New START Treaty or whatever name you think gets your paper going, right? Your next topic. So here's some more instructions. I upped the word count here a little bit, but around 2,500 is good. That's roughly 10 pages is 2,500, but somewhere in that range, around 2,500 is fine. Not including cover page and bibliography and endnote citations. We already went over the 5 questions to answer. Some best practices. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you need to go through them, okay? I'm going to highlight a few. Don't submit as a PDF. Do it as a Word document, please. Because I'm going to do track changes, and I'm going to give you feedback, even though that'll be your final time to do it, but then you'll know, okay, this is what I did well and what I didn't do well. English, oh my goodness. If my students, if they gripe about me, it's because I will check and double check your English. Make sure you're doing that. English is very important. Please don't use AI. What I found, and let me talk about AI here for a minute. One of my students, not a grad student, one of my undergrad students, totally wrote a paper using AI. I called him on it and he admitted it. And I told him, I said, you're lucky I'm not going to go to academic integrity because that is grounds for suspension or to be expelled because it's plagiarism. Now, can you use AI to get ideas, generative ideas? You do that on your own. I frankly don't care. But do not use it to write your paper. I will find out. And my number one AI detector is my brain right here. And I'm not going to tell you all my secrets. But there are certain gives, there are certain tells with AI papers. And please don't do that for any of the assignments. If you use it to make yourself smarter on the topic, fine. But don't use it to write your paper or your discussion questions or your quizzes. Okay? Sorry. I have to be a little harsh on that. And my policy is in the syllabus as well. Okay. Don't write out United States all the time. To me, that shows you have less substance and you're just space filling. AP style for numbers. In other words, 0 to 9, spell it out. 10 and above, use a number, blah, 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 capitalization. A lot of people, I believe that they must be Germans because Germans capitalize a lot of their nouns. And I see a lot of nouns just capitalized for no reason. Certain nouns should be, like when we talk about the West, the cultural West, and not cardinal direction, it should be capitalized, for instance. Active voice instead of passive voice. If you don't know the difference, Google it. But let me give you an example of passive voice. The dog was walked to the store. Passive. We don't know who's doing the action. I walked the dog to the store. Very clear. Active voice. Credible sources in your research. Credible sources are not CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. They can be used as a source for a quote, say, from an interview with the president, the NATO Secretary General, Vladimir Putin, Zelensky, whatever, fine. But the intellectual part should be a credible scholarly source, like Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy, think tanks, Brookings, Hoover, Rand, FPRI, respected periodicals like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, even the Post, etc. Okay. Do not use my lectures as a source. Okay. When I did my research, I found my information somewhere else. So my lectures are not a scholarly source for you. Go and find the actual citation or the information somewhere else. A lot of it you can find in the books that I provide. Be specific, detailed, and precise in your writing. Try to avoid the flowery language. It doesn't really help. Get to the point. Acronyms, some you don't need to spell out. US, UN, NATO, maybe OSCE. But if there's an unusual one out there, spell it out just in case. I do provide Grammarly here. Now, here's the problem with Grammarly. Grammarly is a great resource for you, but it has an AI function too. And one of my students, who was not really cheating, used it to improve a paragraph recently on one of her papers, but she didn't reread it. You know, it went in, it used words that she would never have used, like in tandem, the weaving of the international system, blah, 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 blah. I said, no student's going to write that. So if you use Grammarly, and I don't approve of you using the AI function, but if you do, make sure it's in your own words and you fix it. All right. Citations. Let's get into citations. You must use endnotes. And endnotes are going to be pushed to the very end of the paper. You know, your main report, your main part of your essay, and then your bibliography, and then your endnotes. Okay? That's how I want it organized. If you don't know how to use endnotes, you can Google, how do I use endnotes in Microsoft Word? And it's very easy to follow. They're just like footnotes. The reason I don't like footnotes is they really break up each page. And, you know, and half a page can be used by a footnote. And it should be pushed to the end. That's the way I want it. So I use an example here. You know, the Obama reset's most important achievement was the signing and ratifying of the New START Treaty in 2011. And you can see I have a footnote here, or an endnote, and it's been pushed all the way to the end of the document. Ooh, and there it is. And this is how an endnote should essentially be formatted. The author's name, the name of the book, where it was published, the year, and what page you're quoting from. And you can see that IBID, you know, I did it again up there. If you use a link, that's fine. It should have similar information. Don't need the page number, but you do need to tell me the date you accessed it. Okay? Let's go. So, endnotes, please. I push them to the very last page of the document. So that's about citations. We're going to talk about bibliography here in a minute. So the second to last section of your paper should be analysis. And this should take about a page in your 8 to 10 page report near the end. And this really needs to be your personal analysis of an assessment dealing with the effectiveness of the policies that you've been talking about, or historical analysis. This shouldn't be a history paper per se, but it can be. You can have some historical analysis. Maybe a little bit of the so what, why is this important? And include it, and then you need a conclusion. So kind of a standard conclusion. You need this section heading like this as well, and you're concluding. You can do a little bit of wrap up, you know, a little bit of summary if you like. That's okay. Probably takes, I would say, 2 paragraphs is probably about right for a conclusion. Sometimes 1. Yeah. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is the bibliography page. It's the second to last section. By the way, the bibliography and the endnotes should be on a fresh page. So you're going to see how I push the bibliography to a fresh page once I'm finished writing here. And this is the standard format you should use for a bibliography. It should be titled bibliography, not references, not works cited. Bibliography. All right. You have some great resources in the class that I've given you, from your required reading to the additional reading. Obviously listed in periodicals, articles, journals, academic. I put a few samples below. And now people ask me, what's the difference between a bibliography and endnote citations? Bibliography is just the source. You know, it's not necessarily a page number, and you might not actually cite from it in the endnotes. A bibliography is any resource that helped you write this paper, whether you quoted from it or not. Okay, maybe you list an article here that was really interesting and helped your deep background, but you didn't actually cite from it. You should list it in the bibliography, kind of like what inspired you, right? But also it should reflect, you know, the sources that you also used in the endnotes. You could probably copy and paste some of this right here. You know, I've given you some resources here that you might potentially use. Not this one. The White House has changed all of their websites. But anyways, example. And then endnotes. I know I spent a little bit of time on this. We're going to bust 9 o'clock, I'm afraid, before we get to the quiz review. Or maybe we'll get to it before then. But I want to see if there are any questions. This is really important. I spend a little bit of time because this is how I want the papers to look. I wish that we had a standard for OU and for the College of International Studies, but we don't. So I make my own standard. Any questions on this? It's going to be too difficult. I really won't review first drafts, but I will do this. If you were to send me your paper and say, does the formatting look right? I will do that. I'll take a look and say, yep, it looks good. If I can review it in a minute or so and say, yes, your formatting looks good, I will do that. I won't review a first draft, though, because it takes a lot of time and effort in a short course, and then I'd rather just grade it on the spot. So you don't want me to do that. Final product, okay? So let me go over the checklist. And I won't take as much time on that because that is really documentation you read on your own, but you'll need to do it when you turn in your paper. So let me go to the checklist. So you'll find this in there, and basically you use this checklist before you turn in your paper. So you're telling me you've done all of these things. You've complied with the formatting guidance that I've given you. Cover page, numbers, the font, the size, double spaced, etc., etc., etc. You use endnotes and bibliography. I tell you more about citations again and sources. I give you a few additional resources, including the OU Writing Center. The contents, no AI, please. It doesn't. Remember, I told you I've given you permission, oral permission to use if you want. I don't think it necessarily helps you, but I've given you permission to use it to get ideas, but don't use it to write your paper. Right? How it should look: introduction, main body, analysis, conclusion. Have you edited it? You'll be surprised how many students, even at the master's level, don't even use the basic Microsoft Word editing tools before they turn it in. And when they turn in the final product, the little squiggly red line shows up everywhere. I'm like, why didn't you do spell check at the very least? Punctuation. I know this is a pain, guys, but I found that it's been helpful to students, and grades have gone up as a result of using it instead of not using it. Okay? And you'll want to look at the endnotes here in this. So again, let me stop there, see if there's any questions on the checklist. It is required to turn it in. When you turn in your assignment, you turn it in as you do in Canvas, but then there is that comment section on the assignment once you turn it in, and you can attach it to that and then submit it. And if that doesn't work, you can email it to me. Okay? Yeah, but it always works. No one has a problem with that. It's easy. Any questions on that? Okay, so let me briefly show you again. I'm not going to go into details. I think I opened it up. But and I don't require you to do this. I don't need to see it. But if you want to use an outline, I've provided a template here to help you kind of organize your thoughts. If you want to use it, you can. This is basically a compilation of everything we've kind of talked about, and I've used, like main body headings, section headings here, for example. Don't necessarily mean anything, but on topic here. And you can use this if you like when you're getting your thoughts together to outline. Outlining is useful. It's a lost skill at the undergrad level, but I teach my undergrads to outline, and I make this a gradable event for them. But I don't do that for you guys because I'm assuming you're all smart and you already know how to do that. Okay, any questions before I go over the quiz? Some people have already turned in the quiz. That's great. And I won't be sharing my screen, so you'll just see me kind of reading my screen here. But let me talk about the first quiz. Where did it go? Okay, there it is. So I'm going to read you the instructions. This is your first quiz during the first week of the Summer 2025 Gamma U.S.-Russia Relations course. Most of your answers will be in the form of short written responses, along with a few multiple choice questions and one true false. The questions are generated from the readings and lecture slides from the pre-course readings and slides. Okay, so not from week one that we're in now, it's the pre-course stuff. Now, if you didn't do it pre-course and you're kind of going through both pre-course and first week, that's fine right now. But the first quiz is only on the so-called pre-course material. Okay, to make that clear, not the official week one material. All right. It's open book, open canvas. In other words, you can use the class lecture slides, other material in Canvas, your own notes, our books on the honor system. And I'm going to leave it at this. As you're all master's students, I asked that you not use Google, search engines, AI to look up answers. To Google or to use AI is to cheat. Probably wouldn't help you anyways. There are 15 questions in this quiz. There's more than that because some questions have more than one question, right? But there's 15 main questions. There's a bonus question. Question number 16, if you like, at the end. If you already got 15 out of 15 questions answered properly, I will not give you extra credit. However, if you answered a question incorrectly from questions 1 through 15 and answer the bonus question correctly, I will raise your score appropriately. It is in your best interest to answer the bonus question just in case. All right, and you have 2 hours once you start it. Now it's due this Sunday, May 18th, before midnight Central Time. And I will likely do most of the gradings on Monday, the 19th, hopefully, and get those results out to you as quickly as I can. But once you start it, you have 2 hours. Okay. Just going to questions on the instructions for the first quiz. Pretty standard. Okay. Let's go over the questions. The way I'm going to do the review is this. I'm going to mention the question number, how many points it's worth, and what type of question. You know, is it short answer? Is it multiple choice? Things like this. You'll see that some questions are worth more points than others. That means they're weighted more. You know, probably your short responses, you know, that I have to go in and manually grade are going to be worth more than your multiple choice questions, because multiple choice questions are usually relatively easy. All right, so question number 1 is worth 8 points, and it's short answer. And there's actually 4 questions in it, but they're all related to each other. And short answer could be 1 or 2 words per answer. And the question is basically about the so-called first Russian state. Some might say Slavic state. And the question is about that. You know, what was its name? When was it formed? Who formed it? When was its zenith of power? So we're talking about history, right? Long time ago, right? And again, remember, this is probably going to be right up front in your pre-course lecture slides. So that's question number 1. Question number, and that was short answers for each of those. Question number 2 is worth 8 points. It's a multiple choice. Oh, I'll give you a lot of points for a multiple choice. And this is going to be, you will have seen references to the, what I call the 4 great invasions of Russia. There have been many more invasions of Russia in its history, but what I consider the 4 great ones. And the question is going to be about that. And it's it's on that topic, and it's multiple choice. Okay. Question number 3 is worth 6 points, and it's short answer. There's actually a few questions in there, but they're short answer. You need to read it completely through there. But it's going to be about the term Third Rome. It's about the term Third Rome. Okay? And there's a couple of questions about it in there, and you need to be able to answer it and be specific. 4 is worth 6 points, and short answer, and it's about the Tsar that is considered to be the westernizer of Russia. Okay, these are a lot of history questions, right? Okay, question number 5 is worth 4 points, and it's a multiple choice, and it's about the emancipation of the serfs. Okay, they didn't call it that. I use that terminology because we use the term the Emancipation Proclamation from Lincoln, right, during the Civil War. But this is kind of like the Russian equivalent of that, right? That question is on the emancipation of the serfs. Basically, which czar did it and when. Question number 6 is worth 6 points and short answers. There's actually 3 little questions, 6 ABC. And the questions are all about the last czar, the last Russian czar. Even though Putin considers himself a czar, we're not talking about him. Okay? The last czar of the Romanov family, right? Okay, and question number 7, multiple choice, worth 4 points. And the question is going to be about the provisional government. The provisional government. So this is the government that would have taken over. Let me make sure I don't give away too much here. They're the one that came into power as a result of the first revolution in 1917. the so-called February Revolution, which, by the way, sometimes people call it the March Revolution. That's because there's a difference between the old style and new style calendar for Russia. This is why sometimes when you hear about the October Revolution, you know, the Red Revolution with Lenin, sometimes it's called the November Revolution because it depends on which calendar you're talking about. The old style calendar, October, new style, November. Don't get too wrapped up about that. I talk about it in the lecture slides. Okay. Question number 8. Worth 10 points, short answer. I'm actually going to read this one out in its entirety. Okay, so pay attention and be thinking about it. Here goes. What is the legacy of Lenin's rule? In other words, what kind of governing tradition did he leave the Soviet Union / Russia with after his death? I give you a big hint. Here's the hint. Communism is not a complete response, though it could be part of one. Explain the benefits or pitfalls of this legacy. It's definitely talked about in a reading for the pre-course from the Russia, A Country Study book, which is a U.S. government-produced book. It's old now. But I'll read the question again for you. Question number 8, worth 10 points. Short answer. Probably takes, I would say, to answer this properly, you probably need at least 2 or 3 sentences. Again, here's the question. What is the legacy of Lenin's rule? In other words, what kind of governing tradition did he leave the Soviet Union / Russia with after his death? Hint, communism is not a complete response, though it could be part of one. Explain the benefits or pitfalls of this legacy. Okay, everyone's tracking. All right, good. Question number 9 is worth 8 points, short response. This is going to be about, there's 2 parts to the question, make sure you read it. This is going to be about what the Russians call their part of World War II. And then there's another question related to it, okay? What the Russians call their part of World War II. Not to be confused with what everybody calls World War II. You know, for most of us, World War II started on September 1st, 1939, with the Hitlerite invasion of Poland. In Europe, May 8th, or in Japan, September of 1945. But this question is about what the Russians call their part of World War II. Question number 10, yes, is worth 10 points. There's 2 questions clearly there. And this question is going to be, both are related to the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, speaking of 1939. Okay, the question is going to be on that topic. All right, question number 11 is worth 8 points, multiple choice. It's a question about what Khrushchev famously did at the Congress of the Communist Party in 1956. Quite famous. You might even know it off the top of your head, but that question is going to be about what Khrushchev did at the 20th Congress of the Communist Party in 1956. Multiple choice. Question number 12 is your true false. And I'm just going to say that it has to do with the Helsinki Final Act, or Helsinki Accords of 1975. Okay, need to get a sip of water just a minute. Oops, I'm going to spill my water if I don't put this on. Okay. All right, here we go. Next question. Question number 13, a short response worth 8 points. This is going to be about those great Russian words, perestroika and glasnost. The question is going to be about those 2 terms, perestroika and glasnost. By the way, any of you Russian speakers? No? Okay, this will be new for you. Good. Those were quite famous terms back in the mid to late 80s. All right, question number 14, worth 5 points, short answer. And this is going to have to do with Pearl Treaty, probably the most successful one in the 80s. And that's all I really want to give you on that. You'll definitely see it in the lecture notes. Arms Control Treaty. Now, this isn't the one that I need details on. You know, this has nothing to do with my arms control lecture, which is in week 4. That will have been covered in the pre-course lecture materials. Okay. And let's see, last of the main questions, question 15, worth 5 points, is going to be about the end of the Soviet Union. The end of the Soviet Union. That's what the question is about. And the bonus question, no hint. You either know it or you don't. What I will tell you is some of my students say, you didn't cover it in the lecture notes. And I'll be, you clearly didn't read your lecture notes. It is covered in it. But you do have to read carefully and completely. Okay, questions? Anyone need a clarification on any of them? Good. You guys are smart. So let me just see if there was anything else. Okay. I will wrap things up here. We did bust our time here a little bit, but that's okay. I always do that on the first one because of the introductions. They take a little bit of time. So the last thing what I want to do is talk a little bit about the course itself overall, and then do a quick summary of what we've discussed tonight. And then if you have any other questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Shouldn't take more than 5 more minutes. Make sure you do the reading. That's why I encourage students to get the books early. You know, I couldn't officially start the course before it officially started, but I encourage you to read early and to do it if you could. If you could not, that's okay. You can still do this, but it is an intense course. So this first week particularly, if you haven't started before now, you have that pre-course lecture to go through in week 1. So it is important that you do that. Students will ask me, well, how much time should I spend on this? And there's no precise answer. What I will tell you is this. If you wait till the weekend to do this, it's probably not the best way to approach the course. I would try to do a little bit every day, even if you have a full-time job, even if you're deployed, even if you are, very, very busy. I would try to spend, I would recommend a couple of hours per weekday. But even if you spent 1 hour per weekday, that's better than not. And then on the weekend, I would recommend 2 to 3 hours each day on the weekend. So carve out some time away from your family. I know that's tough to do, especially with little ones if you have them in the house. But try to do that. And don't try to cram it all in on Sunday, right? You know, for your weekly discussion question, the idea would be do the weekly discussion question during the week. People comment on it. And then, and I want you guys to interact for the weekly discussion questions. Matter of fact, I should talk about those a little bit. I didn't. And let me do that in a minute once I'm done with talking about the course overall. So 1 to 2 hours per weekday, 2 to 3 per day on the weekend probably is going to be adequate. I would recommend spending more time than that, but that's probably adequate time to do that. If you can avoid being on vacation right now, these 4 weeks, I would do that. It's tough to do it while you're lying on the beach sipping pina coladas down in Costa Rica. Okay, it's a nice thought. Let me go ahead and talk about those weekly discussion questions briefly. I forgot to talk about those. There's 3 of them. You have to do all 3 of them, right? The 4-week course. And so let me just let me share my screen. So you can see this is my assignments tab. Your version of Canvas may look a little bit different, but there's the first quiz that we just went over. Here are the weekly discussion questions. There are 3 of them, and you have to do them. Once you submit your post, you have to interact with at least 3 different students, and please use their names. So, Christian, for instance, if you're commenting on Alfonso's posting, please write, "Hey, Alfonso," or "Dear Alfonso," or "Alfonso, I really found this interesting, blah, 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 blah." It helps me to grade. And you need to do that with at least 3 different people. The idea of this is for you all to exchange information. Did you all understand the reading the same way or the question? You don't have to agree with each other, but if you don't agree with each other, I would ask that you be constructive in your disagreements. Okay. Most students are, I don't have an issue. But don't let politics ruin anything. Okay. This is an academic course. This is, free exchange of ideas. No idea is stupid, right? And you can disagree, but disagree respectfully. But the idea is for you to interact with each other, and it makes you a better student on the topic. Your second quiz will be, and how I grade these. So they're worth 10 points each question. And I grade from 0 to 7 for your initial posting. You answer the question, right? Let's even open up question 1, right? So the question is, you have a choice of 2 questions here. I won't necessarily read them, but one is about the relationship during the 19th century, and then the other one's about the relationship during World War II. So you could choose one of those to answer. You don't answer both, just choose one of them. And so I grade you on your initial posting, which should be at least 200 words, not more than 400. And I grade you from 0 to 7 on that. Most people do well. And then I grade you from 0 to 3 on your interactions with at least 3 different people, 3 different students. If you do a simple interaction like, "Hey, Alfonso, I thought you did a great job answering that question," and that's all you do, that's not going to cut it, okay? You give them a little bit more feedback. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did you find their point of view interesting? Did they see something you didn't? Things like this, okay? So it's worth 10 points. Okay, second quiz, which, as I've indicated, I will probably do a review next Wednesday. This is an audible change from the syllabus, because I would like to do that for you, and I won't be able to do it the following week, because I'm gone, and I don't anybody to do it on Memorial Day or Friday or on the weekend. So I'll probably schedule that, and more to follow on that. There's your course written assignment, and then the final quiz. And I will go over the final quiz on our last Zoom, which, as I say, tentatively, I've scheduled for June 2nd. I need to officially do that. But yeah. All right, guys, 9:15. I went over 15 minutes. I'm willing to stay here as long as you all, as long as you want to answer your questions here. But I am finished for tonight. Any questions? And it can be about the course, what I've discussed, grading, the topic. If you want to talk about the topic at all, we haven't done that, of U.S.-Russia relations. I'm happy to do that for a little while. Maybe not all night, but I'm willing to stay here if you are. So, questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Actually, 2 questions. My first question is, how do you prefer to be addressed?
So I am not a PhD. I'm not a doctor. Some people do, and I don't correct them. It's not that I enjoy that. Probably Mr. Andrew is fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Andrew, my second question is related to the discussion posts. So I noticed in some of your dialogue in this session, sometimes your questions are guiding questions, and sometimes your questions are, you need to answer these. I already did the discussion post for this week, and I picked the second one, and you asked 6 questions, which is a lot to try to answer in that 400-word limit. So
Yeah.
Are you looking for an answer to all of your questions on the discussion post, or are they more like guiding you to help you kind of formulate an answer?
It's more like guiding you here, but let me look at that one that you did and make sure I'm not lying to you.
Okay.
So, yeah, so in your response here, I said, in your response, consider the following questions. So that's guiding, right?
Okay.
So that's fine. If you don't answer everyone, that's okay. And I'll be honest with you, my grading on these is pretty easy. If you're putting together some sort of logical response to the question, you're going to do well. Where people don't do well is in interacting with the other students. They either only do it with one, and then I score it as an 8, because it's 7 plus 1, because it's 1 for each. You have to do at least 3, right? So that's where people generally don't do well. Here's another thing that some of your predecessors have done is they've used AI to answer the question and in discussion questions. And that's not the point of the discussion question. The discussion question is for you to read the material and go through it. And let me just see here. See, discussion questions, let me just share this so you can see it literally here. And this is, I'm sorry I'm going off on this tangent, but you can see right here, the discussion questions are worth 25% of your grade. I used to have it worth 35. So I've downgraded what it's worth because people were using AI. And I've considered getting rid of the discussion questions, but students begged me actually to keep them because what I was going to put in their place was a quiz that you had to do your readings and lecture notes for the week, and I gave you a 10-minute quiz to answer 15 or 20 questions where you either know the answer or you don't. They would all be multiple choice, right? Chick, 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 like that. And so students talked me out of doing that. Professor Sartorius has gone to that style because he was very frustrated with students not doing the work and giving it to AI. So don't do that. And I'm not saying that you did, but that's the point of the discussion questions is for you all to discuss it, to get better on it, to use your noggin, to think about the issues being presented, to consider the questions that I've provided, and see if it makes sense to you. Because some of you, in this course, there are 18 of you. Some of you probably know the topic of Russia pretty well, and some of you know nothing about Russia. And so these questions are guided to kind of cover everybody in that area. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That was very helpful because I think I got hung up on trying to answer to all of the questions, and I know my writing style. It sounded very disjointed in my writing style because I was just trying to answer all of it. So if you notice a change between discussion 2 from discussion 1 to discussion 2, that's why I figured out that I didn't have to answer them all.
No, that's okay. And look, frankly, I'm not going to. If you go over 400 words, I'm not going to subtract points. Okay. So that's a good point to put out there. If you're above 600 words, it's probably too much, right?
Okay.
So if you bust 400, don't lose sleep over it. And even if you bust 600, I'm probably not going to lose sleep over it either. But what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to, scan the text instead of read it very closely. And what I do in my grading is I kind of scan the text, your answers, make sure you're kind of on track. I'm not going to go after your English in the discussion questions. Don't let that fool you. I will go after your English in the research paper. But, I'm less worried about your English in the discussion questions. I'm more interested about the interaction. You guys get the topic, compare and contrast and argue with each other. That's quite all right. That's the point. You learn better when you have that discussion.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry for my long-winded response. That I've truly turned into an educator now. So, other question. I used to be so short in my answers in the military. Get it done. Now I have to give a little bit more. Other questions? All good? Okay.
Mr. Andrew, I have a question, but it's more on the topic, so it's not on the class. So I don't know if the other students want to stay. They don't have to stay.
Yeah. So before you ask the question, let me just say, let me do some wrap-up remarks, and then I can answer questions like that. So if you need to go ahead and go. Just remember, I'm likely going to have a Zoom next Wednesday and on Monday the 2nd, and I will put out an announcement on that here in the next 2 days. Okay. So welcome to stay. And if you're just curious in the topic, want to listen in, or if you have another question, but it's officially ended. So and if you need to go, go. Alfonso, sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
So mine's really on the New START treaty. So I'm stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, which is like the nuclear mission there, and so we have to deal with the New START treaty very closely. And I was wondering, what do you think about that? Because recently, what we're dealing with right now is the old practice was Russia will send their inspectors to us, and we will send inspectors to them, and we're inspecting each other's weapons. And more recently, we haven't done that. Right? Russia and U.S. have not done that at all.
So we haven't done that since before COVID, actually.
Right. Yeah. So it's been for a while, and so and we're looking at that. And we're having a topic like, are we going to do the New START treaty again? Having a conversation around like my other peers, my other colleagues, like I think it's important. I think we need to do it just because having another arms race, especially a nuclear arms race, is probably not a good idea. And I was wondering, like, what do you think about that?
Yeah. No. Thank you for the question. So I'll start answering your question how Rose Gottemoeller would. She's a very expert on this. It's in our national security, in the interest of our national security, to get arms control right. It increases our security. And a little bit of history, at the height of the Cold War, between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, we had 70 or 80,000 nuclear weapons. Ridiculous. Once we discovered that, well, we only need about 1,000 each to completely destroy each other in most of the world. So that's why you started seeing the limits of, or the reductions, not the limits, the reductions of strategic weapons come down because they made sense for both sides. And it was in our national security interest because they're costly, they're expensive, as you know. And in fact, some people would say that forcing the Soviet Union to spend a lot of money on military stuff helped them crumble. And there is some truth to that. But I think it's, one of my heroes, and mainly probably because I grew up in that era, would be people like President Reagan and General Secretary Gorbachev, because they realized that they really needed to move arms control along and get it right. And the famous term, trust but verify. So we can trust each other, but the best way to trust each other is to verify, to go in and do those intrusive inspections and do data exchanges. Like what's the circumference of the O-ring on the Minuteman III missile or whatever. Those are pretty typical questions. And it builds confidence. These are, CDMs, confidence building measures. And, when we'll share data, we'll test launch a Minuteman III now and again. The one aspect I think is still active is because of the 1988 ballistic missile test agreement, we still notify each other when we test missiles. Because if we don't, could that be a secret, first strike by the Russians? And so, they don't want to just start launching test missiles and our reaction to be, what? Okay, we need to dial up Alfonso. Turn the key, dude. Let's go. Let's get it on. So yes, I think it's extremely important to get back to some sort of new start or start 4 or whatever we want to call it, and have that kind of trust and reliability. But the Russians aren't just going to come to the table if they think it's not to their advantage to do so, and that's going to be the problem. And we need a convincing argument for it, like we're modernizing our nuclear warheads. We have better systems in place. Whatever the case may be, and I'll be a little bit critical. This isn't political, but I'll be a little bit critical of Trump 1.0, the first administration. They messed around with it too long, and they didn't get the extension in because they wanted to include China in on it, which I think is smart. But you might have to, deal with the Chinese separately. The Russians don't want to deal with the Chinese; they want to deal with us. And they don't want China part of this agreement. And when Biden administration came in, within 2 weeks of it, they got New START extended. And then, of course, we didn't do inspections because of COVID. And then after, kind of as COVID was ending, the Ukraine war started. The Russians were getting a little, frisky, whether they wanted to restart it or not. And then finally, a little over 2 years ago in February of 2023, Putin said, well, we will abide by START treaty, the new START treaty, but no more inspections, no verification inspections, no exchange of data. And that's where we more or less, I mean, I've simplified it a bit, but that's more or less where we're at this point. The devil's in the details, Alfonso. How do we get there? We got to get there somehow. And I'm very worried. It takes years to negotiate these things, and we are 9 months away from this expiring.
Right. Another question, I think, just kind of, what do you think? So, we have the new Sentinel project, the modernization of the ICBMs. And, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, what perfect timing for the U.S. to modernize their weapons when we don't have inspectors out there anymore, And I wonder if the Trump administration or any new administration will look into this and be like, this is a strategic advantage and not to maybe restart these inspections just because, we don't want to show Russia our new, ace in our, in our upper sleeve, right? Because it's essentially a new weapon, no one really knows what it is. I mean, I know people building it know, but Russians don't know it. Our enemies don't know what it is. If we start the treaty and the inspectors again, they're gonna know exactly what kind of weapon it is or what capabilities it is.
That's the devil in the details. What do we want to give up? I mean, to have some trust, you've got to be able to do that.
Right.
You don't need to show them everything. If you read, when you go through the nuclear arms control lecture, Rose Gottemoeller, and I'm going to go back to her and cite her on this. She said the holy grail for nuclear arms control is not just new weapon systems like that, but to inspect nuclear weapons warhead storage sites. And we've never done that. And to be clear, on every one of our reduction treaties or limitations from SALT, no nuclear warhead has ever been destroyed. They might have been decommissioned. They're put in storage, but the only thing that's ever been destroyed were delivery systems, whether they were missiles like the Pershing II missiles in Europe from INF, to B-52 bombers, to submarines. So, the nuclear triad, right? And they were the delivery systems, but the warheads themselves, that's probably the most sensitive that we're not really willing to share with each other at. And that would really be, if we could trust each other enough that much, that would be it. But yeah, you're right. But as far as the Sentinel is concerned, I'm not an expert on it. I'm aware of the modernization program. But if we want to get to serious arms control, we're going to have to show them a little bit. We're not going to want to, but if we don't do that, what's going to happen? Well, we might have another arms race. Are we willing to fund another arms race? The Russians have some pretty good systems, and we do too. And strategic deterrence, the concept of MAD, mutually assured destruction, still works. Right. Our ballistic missile defenses are not enough to stop the Russian arsenal. They're probably enough to stop North Korea and Iran if they were to acquire one. But no way you're going to stop the Russian arsenal. I mean, stop some, but they would overwhelm it. Right. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question very well.
I mean, no, it just got me more thinking. I found it interesting because, I definitely know the weapon storage area has been inspected because I was there on the ground. I was probably enlisted before this in security forces as well. And so I was assigned a duty of, guardian inspectors, just watching them. It was a fun little gig, but it was, left a lasting impact on me. I was just watching, okay, this is what a treaty can do and how much power it has and how significant it is because, it does make an impact. I guess the different question is, what if we do build a system? Trump is calling the Golden Dome. He wants to build that. Sure, fine. If we build a system like that to where we can stop all the nuclear weapons coming through, how would Russia look to that? Will they start an arms race? Will they make? I mean, they would have to. I'm assuming at this point, if we do something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was one of their biggest problems when we talked about missile defense in Europe, and putting interceptors in Poland and radars in Czech Republic and all of this type of thing, and they were focused on Iran. Russians never bought it, and they look at any ballistic missile defense system as as a danger to the strength of their arsenal. And there is something to be said about mutually assured destruction and deterrence theory. And the ultimate ace up the sleeve, and unfortunately, is not our ground-based ICBMs. For you, it's our subs, it's our boomers, because they're very hard to track. They move all the time, and that is the ultimate ace up the sleeve, which ensures second strike capability, right? So, if there was a Russian surprise attack in Montana and North Carolina or North Dakota were wiped out, submarines would be like, no problem, we got this. So, I mean, that's a big part of that. I lost my train of thought. Ask your question again. There was something else I was going to say.
Oh, I lost my train of thought too. Golden Dome, if we had that, well, I guess the submarine. I mean, the Russians have submarines too, and I guess they technically have that second strike ability as well.
They do. Most of their fleet is most of their ballistic missile subs. Not all of them, but the majority of them are in the Northern Fleet, based out of the Murmansk Kola Peninsula area, and extremely powerful. And they've updated them, and they're putting new subs out to sea, almost literally as we speak. So definitely to be worried about. But as far as Golden Dome is concerned, I mean, I go back to the old sword and shield argument. For every better shield that someone produces, there's going to be a weapon that's invented that gets around it, right? So, this talk of Golden Dome reminds me a little bit of SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, or what they used to call Star Wars during the Reagan era. Good idea. Is it really 100% effective? Probably never going to be. The other thing is, what about hypersonic weapons? What about drones? And what about the Russians using an undersea drone and light a nuke off the coast of San Diego, and a tsunami totally wipes out our naval base there? So, there are ways around it. And frankly, if you had a really good ballistic missile defense, and this was the argument Reagan always had, and there's something to it, great, we're protected, but you actually have created a situation, and this goes back to deterrence theory and game theory and all of this. Before we would be able to deploy that, would it be in the Russians' best interest to go ahead and execute a first strike before they can't? And so you upset what we call the apple cart of strategic stability. And I'm not advocating that we don't do that. But what I am advocating is that ABM, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty of 1972, which went along with SALT I in 1972, signed by President Nixon and Brezhnev at that time, they limited how much ballistic missile defense there was, because the more ballistic missile defense they had, what is the effectiveness of theirs, particularly their land-based ICBM systems, and any ballistic type of missile. So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into this. And in fact, shouldn't we encourage the Russians to do the same thing so we have stability? And that's always the point when you have nuclear weapons, to have some sort of strategic stability. Because when you upset that apple cart of strategic stability, that's when one side, if they feel they're going to get weaker, that's when they're going to lash out somehow. That's my take. So you don't have to agree with it. It's just that those are my thoughts on that, and it can be a hard pill to swallow, especially in this environment. But if we were to ever get back to a rational, well, I think Putin is rational, but to a leader more like Gorbachev, who, by the way, is viewed as a traitor in Russia, as a hero in the West, but someone who is willing to work with the West and not view each other as enemies. Some idea of détente, some idea of peaceful coexistence. We can look at history for those terms, so that we're in a better situation. But yeah, I hear you where you're from. But those are my thoughts.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Can I comment on this?
Sure.
Okay, so you speak about you say that Russia doesn't want China in, but there seems to be greater and greater cooperation between Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, to the point where we're even seeing Chinese and North Koreans in the Ukraine fight. Now, I think that MAD is definitely a vector of them not using nuclear weapons against us. But and I wrote this in a strategic threat assessment for the Oklahoma National Guard. I think the biggest threat is adversarial cooperation right now. Now they are developing also chemical biological weapons as well, just because of their understanding that MAD would just be terrible for all of us, right? So that's just a point of view. I definitely appreciate Alfonso's view on this, on the weapons of mass destruction point of view, but I think we need to focus on like the other aspects of Russia as well, not just weapons of mass destruction. And yeah, I don't know what you have to say to that, Ted. Like adversarial cooperation and how they've made the strides they have in the Ukraine war, as far as like financial backing. We used the financial bomb, right? So we took away their SWIFT code, but China had already built something against that, and so that's how Russia's still economically standing up.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, I can use another word for adversarial cooperation. That's called an enemy alliance, is what that is.
Right.
And go figure, they learned from us, because the United States, okay, I'm trying not to tread too much into politics here, but we cannot go it alone.
Right.
And we need our allies. And if we don't have them, we're going to be torn apart. Russia sees this, but just to give you a little bit of reality, yes, there is this so-called unlimited partnership between Russia and China. Best insights, and this is not just based on my own understanding, but some experts in the field, more in the Chinese part of the world. We should more look at like the Chinese-Russian relationship as a great term, frenemies, right? Friendly enemies, because the Russians really don't trust the Chinese at the end of the day. And what I meant by them not wanting the Chinese in, what I meant by that was not having them in the same arms control arrangements with the United States. The Chinese have also, the Russians have turned to the Chinese to provide infrastructure for the Northern Sea Route above Russia's northern coast. And with the Western divestment and sanctions, oil companies pulled out of there. So the Chinese have been helping develop ports for them, but they don't have free reign of the Northern Sea Route. They have to be escorted by Russian icebreakers or ships. And they really don't trust each other at the end of the day. They are not truly an enemy alliance. They would be, probably your term is better, adversarial cooperation. But I do think it has limits. Quite right about nuclear biological chemical. But, when I was in the Army 30 years ago, 1st Cavalry Division, Fort Hood, we were on the tip fiddle, if you know what that term is. We were in a tip fiddle to go to Korea in case that thing got going. And it almost got going in 1994. And, first thing we knew is we were going to get slimed by the North Koreans, meaning hit with chemical weapons. So it's no surprise that they have them. Biological weapons are particularly nasty. The Russians have been working on that for a long time. Very, very bad stuff. And I'm not sure the state of development for Iran, but, somewhere in there, they used chemical weapons in the Iran-Iraq War, for instance. And China, I would assume, also have it. By the way, I made up an acronym to describe all of them. I call that enemy cooperation CRINC, which stands for China China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. So you can use that. I didn't patent that term. But yeah, you bring up really good points. Some of this goes back to understanding you can't really face the United States in a one-on-one military match. You're almost going to be overmatched every time. They learned this, and this is going to be one of my lessons from my course on the first Gulf War, is China was paying attention. Russia was too, after they saw their client state of Iraq do very poorly in 1991 with Russian equipment, Russian tactics, or Soviet/Russian tactics doctrine, and decided, yeah, we never want to fight the Americans in a fair fight or, in a desert or head-to-head. So asymmetric warfare, this is really, really where it got its start. And death by 1,000 pricks, essentially. And that's how you fight the United States. You fight it by election interference. You fight it by investments in the United States itself. And you fight in areas where the U.S. is not that good at.
We call that the gray zone dominance.
That's a new term. Someone probably at DoD earned $100,000 for coming up with that term.
Yep.
Yes. That's right. If you go back decades and decades, there's been the same concept. We just call it a new thing. But gray zone, that's right. Yeah. Good word for it, gray zone.
Hey, Christian, one quick question for your side. Because I don't know too much of Army tactics or anything like that. Are you guys following this, ACE initiative that the Air Force is pushing, the Agile Combat Employment, or anything like that?
I am not as of now, but I will as of tomorrow because I have a meeting with the Air Force about it. So, with the Air Nation.
Nice.
So I will let you know.
I'm just curious because, man, they are just pushing that. And I understand if we go to war with in the Pacific, like, we're literally going to do island hopping. So you just have another word for it. But I was wondering if in the Army had a coined term for it or not. So.
Yeah, I'll learn about it tomorrow, actually. So.
The Marine Corps has a term for it. When I left Marine Corps Forces South in 2019, they were really in the transition of what they called getting back to the Navy after they'd been in Afghanistan and Iraq as essentially a second land army, and they wanted to get back to their roots, amphibious, forces, and they had a term and a doctrinal term, a little bit more technical than island hopping, but I think it's still the best term. But maybe, Christian, that's your homework. You can tell us. I think you'll probably find out a little bit about the Marine Corps theology on that.
I know that I'm part of the Infantry Brigade Combat Team there in Norman. And Army Secretary of Staff or some person sent us a memo, and that one's moving over to Mobile Combat Team. And I think it's more so to address the Indo-PACOM region, because that's where the money's at now, especially with this administration threatening to pull out of NATO. So that's where our eyes are at.
Yeah, that would be a mistake, but yes, okay.
All right,
we would essentially do the Russians' work for them. So why do we need to do that? All right, guys.
Exactly. Thank you.
Anything else? I think we've gone on long enough here, and I've got a few other things I need to do. But any questions on the course? Good. All right.
Good. Thank you.
All right. So I'll put out an announcement on the next Zoom dates and probably a new Zoom link as well for that. And otherwise, welcome to the course. I'm sorry it's a bit intense. I know there's a lot of work to be done. Take a deep breath and just wade into it. I know you'll do well. So have a good night. Talk to you all later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.